Welcome to our hangout with Sue Stephenson, author of Leading with Trust, and her colleague Ardit Stutz. Today's hangout is on the 10 critical steps, and I will go ahead and hand it over to you all.
Well, thank you, Alex. So our plan is to walk you through the 10 critical steps to build out of distrust. And we've developed this sequence of 10 steps over a number of years to increase your success using this book. And you'll find these steps listed on page 37 in the book, although we've altered the sequence somewhat based on our experience and feedback. These are not easy steps. It isn't a quick fix that happens overnight, and we found that it can take years in some cases, a couple of years, to see significant change, but don't be discouraged. We know that although many districts and schools and groups start with distrust, we've seen big changes as they work on trust. So there is a logic to the sequence, and the first 4 steps are lower risk steps, and they will help get you started. And you know, simply by making the topic of trust discussable, you've made a huge step forward. And as trust grows, the groups are going to take more risks and be creative and grow in new directions. And all of that will improve learning for students. So let's jump right in and start, with, of course, with step 1. And it belongs and begins with the focus squarely on student learning. And where else should it be? We suggest a place to start with this is to highlight with your staff the correlation of higher trust levels and student achievement. Researchers Brick and Schneider concluded that the single most important factor that can be changed and improved is the degree to which staff members trust and respect each other. So in schools with distrust, they found, there was, in their study, it was a 7-year study, there was virtually no chance of improvement in reading and math. But in stark contrast, the schools with high levels of trust were 3 times more likely to improve. So you can look in Leading with Trust on page 98 for more details on that research. To make it easier to share that information with your staff or group, there's a reproducible article online at Solution Tree called Research on Trust. And we'll share the website for that in a few minutes on the screen. So I've included in it the trust glass as an organizer and summarized the pages of the book in a 3-page article. And it gives a definition of trust and distrust. So trust is really the confidence in the competence and character of someone, and distrust is a suspicion of their credibility. Online as well, and there's another reproducible called Improving Relationships Within the Schoolhouse. It's an article, pivotal article by Roland Barth for you to share, and those 2 reproducible articles are not in the book, but they're online. So that's step 1.
Step 2 involves identifying the barriers to building trust in a group and is described in the book on page 13. By naming barriers and discussing what they look like and sound like, the group can then face these and discuss how they can work towards overcoming them. When identifying barriers to developing trust, we identify 6 types of barriers for groups to think about. And in our December 9th hangout, we'll describe an activity to get folks to talk about these in more detail.
So step 3 outlines the need to have a facilitation team, a group of people to work with the principal or the leader of the group to build trust. And as a principal myself, I relied on trusted representatives of the staff who worked with me to assess what worked and didn't work in order to plan the next steps. Ideally, that facilitation team could be your PLC team. This small team or group of 3 to 5 staff members, they keep records, they monitor the progress, they go back and forth between the staff, and they share the workload with the leader. And best of all, they try out the activities first and tweak them to suit the needs of the staff. And it's a real bonus for them because they're building their own leadership capacity. We've also found that it would be ideal for the facilitation team to have a copy of the book as well.
The fourth step, building relationships one conversation at a time, involves structuring opportunities for staff to be with each other and to talk, have fun, and get to know each other better. Several strategies are described in Leading with Trust, beginning on page 39. These can begin with having a group of staff responsible for planning social events either during the day, for example, staff lunches on Fridays, or after school, such as a Christmas party or an outing to a baseball game. Or you can simply provide time during staff meetings for staff to talk to each other about a topic of mutual interest. One strategy that we often model in our workshops is one from Lencioni called Personal Histories Activity. In this activity, each person has the opportunity to share with a small group some of their family background and how it has influenced them in their current role. A variation is to have participants bring with them a shoebox with several artifacts that depict something about themselves that they can share with the group. These conversations allow staff to open themselves up a bit to others and begin to set a tone of respect and dignity. So that graphic that you've been seeing also has the website on the bottom, and just a recap of those 4 steps. In step 5, a leader or a facilitation team invites feedback and collects data on trust levels that currently exist in the group. This may come after the leader has already gathered some feedback about relationships between the group and the leader, and may often have taken the form of a survey or face-to-face discussions, for example, as part of the leader's entry plan. So the leader has already modeled this strategy and can then move on to perhaps ask the facilitation team to come up with a way to gather from the group their sense of the level of trust that exists in the group. One very quick way to gather baseline data that we've used in workshops is to ask participants to hand in a little sticky note with the level of trust, either by number or the name from the trust class, that they think exists in the group. Then we collate this information and we present it back to them overlaid on the trust class graphic. Leading with Trust describes several ways of gathering feedback, and there are some examples of surveys. The reproduce this process is anonymous, though. Gathering this information when the level of trust is likely fairly low can provide baseline information, and then the process or the survey can be repeated later in the year or annually to determine how the level of trust is improving. In our December 9th Hangout, we'll discuss some lessons we've learned about gathering feedback and some cautions that we're thinking are very important to note.
Okay. So many groups need to lighten up and have permission to have some fun. And this is step 6. And you know, it's tricky and it needs some finesse because it can appear as a little contrived or phony if there's distrust. So be careful and kind of take baby steps here. The humor in a distrusting culture might be sarcastic or unhealthy, and you might want to watch for that. So for example, when you feel the time is right with the facilitation team, you can celebrate the success of staff members and recognize their efforts, or tell a funny story that can break the ice, or maybe use a humorous video. And I have to say here that my Canadian Solution Tree colleague Wayne Hulley and I often had discussions about the need to focus more on relationships in building trust and school improvement. So having some fun together is often a missing piece. And you can read more about this in Leading with Trust on page 53. And many people tell us that there's not much laughing going on where they work. And what do you think about what they'd say at your workplace? And two of my other books focus on this one step: happiness, laughter, and humor.
Step 7, groups agree on norms of acceptable conduct. It's important to note that attempting to set norms too early in the process of developing trust may backfire if groups do not trust each other enough to express what they would like interaction or conversations to look like. Norms, which are often called protocols or contracts or working agreements or sometimes ground rules, are a written set of descriptions of what the group agrees it will and will not tolerate, and what the group explicitly would like their interactions to be like. These norms should be positive in tone and fairly explicit in describing interactions and conversations. Agreeing on a set of norms can increase everyone's comfort level, because it then becomes clear what is expected and what won't be tolerated. Knowing this can reduce anxiety in the group and open the door to more participation in discussion and decision making, more honesty, and an increased sense of ownership by the group. It's always best if a group can be involved in coming up with its own norms. And Leading with Trust describes some strategies on pages 59 to 62. Part of the discussion should be about what the group agrees to do when someone is not sticking to the norms. And a written set of norms should be revisited periodically to see if the group agrees that its actual behaviors match the written norms. In our workshops, we often use 3 categories for developing norms. We call them the 3 R's. Respect yourself. For example, a norm in this one might be something like express your opinion and contribute to discussion and decision making. Respect for others. For example, a norm like we all agree to turn off our cell phones during our meetings and only turn them on during breaks. And respect the process. For example, a norm like we all agree to participate in activities our leader designs to engage us.
So that's steps 5 to 7. And when the group senses that it's ready, step 8 is the time to formally get the real issues out from under the table and up onto the table for everyone to face. And this step is described on page 66. By this time in the process, you may have a good idea of what the issues really are, or at least the broad areas that need attention, but you need to formally identify them with the staff. And one method here that we've used is to put people into work teams to describe the issues in more detail, or again, you could distribute sticky notes to them and ask for anonymous details that are then summarized for use in step 9. So you have the issues and you have some description about what those issues really are. And there's kind of a sense of relief because people know they're out on the table. And now that trust levels are higher, it could be the time to discuss beliefs or a vision of success for the school or team. They would be ready for that. So you need to welcome the ideas and seriously deal with them, even if you're sensitive about them and they may even involve your behavior, your own behavior. The issues may have been festering for a long time, and people need to get them out on the table in order to build trust and move on.
So by step 9, the group has reached a point where it understands the existing barriers to developing a higher level of trust in their group, They've had time to get to know each other better, and they have a willingness to work towards building a greater degree of trust. So it's time to move from issues to actions and come up with a plan as to what the group will do to change the level of trust. Leading with Trust describes this step on pages 70 to 76 and includes a story called the Abilene Paradox that can be used with the group. On page 211, commitment continuum helps individuals and groups decide who's in on the actions and to what degree success is likely. Page 74 outlines the kinds of questions that need to be agreed upon when coming up with an action plan. For example, what are the suggested components of this action? Who will adopt this issue and lead this solution? When should this be done? Sometimes it may be useful to bring in some outside assistance to facilitate. So this is where Sue and I come in. Also, if you're trying to make a distrusting situation improve and it seems to be going nowhere, there are basically two choices. Stay the course and keep going, or decide to quit and move on or leave the group. The latter is a difficult decision and might be best made through discussion with a mentor or a trusted friend.
So now we're at step 10, and it becomes clear here what teams and structure are needed to take the actions or move towards the goals you've identified. So you can focus on those issues that are already on the table. Now, some teams that are already in place may be redirected or even disbanded if they don't suit the goals. So the whole purpose of this building trust is to help use teams in the school in the best way. And one helpful strategy we often use is to ask participants to draw on a piece of paper the work teams that they currently have in place, and then to really sit back and discuss whether they're outdated or still serving a purpose or need to be added to the plate. Usually when something's added, something needs to be taken away because we're already overloaded. So our school improvement teams often extend their reach outside the school to collaborate and connect with schools across the district, country, or even around the world. And we need high levels of trust to make this happen. So this has been a whirlwind description of the 10 steps to build out of distrust. And remember that we're available to facilitate this process in person with your teams. In our final hangout on December 9th at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to share some lessons we've learned along the way, working with many groups as we've used this book, and from our own experience with school and department staffs. We're going to share what I call my trust circle, which is not in the book, something I added as we're working with teams after the book was printed, and we'll describe those 6 barriers to trust in more detail. And we'll give you some more tips to build from early trust to mature trust and move up that trust glass to make the transition from a group to a team. So we'll see you then. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us. Our next hangout is December 9th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Lessons Learned. For more info on Leading with Trust and other Solution Tree resources, visit us at www.solution-tree.com or on Twitter @SolutionTree. Thanks.